talking all night. Ben's got the cart, Sam's got the mic. They're shuffling stories left and right. But where's Nick, man, where's Nick tonight? Two fish swimming in the stream, talking poker hands and movie scenes, flipping chips and chasing dreams. Oh, Nick, we need you on our team. Breaking down flops and TV plots, games they've played and the hands they've lost. Sam says raise, Ben says call. Nick's not here to settle it all. They laugh, they deal, they analyze. But Nick's absence, it multiplies. Two fish swimming in the stream, talking poker hands and movie scenes, flipping chips and chasing dreams. Oh, Nick, we need you on our team. They laugh, they deal, they analyze. But Nick's absence, it multiplies. Two fish swimming in the stream, talking poker hands and movie scenes, flipping chips and chasing dreams. Oh, Nick, we need you on our team. Nick, we've got a seat just for you, with your favorite snack and a fresh cold brew. Come join the chatter, come share the ride. Two fish plus one makes the perfect tide. New fish swimming in the stream, talking poker hands and movie scenes, flipping chips and chasing dreams. Oh, Nick, we need you on our team. Nick, we've got a seat just for you, with your favorite snack and a fresh cold brew. Come join the chatter, come share the ride. Two fish plus one makes the perfect tide. Two fish plus one makes the perfect tide. Plus one makes the perfect tide.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Legend Ben, one on Poker Stars.
Top of the morning to ya. I'm Sammy McFammy, East Coast Sam on Poker Stars.
And today, guys, we are joined by a very special guest, a man who knows much about television, podcasting about television, television about podcasts, Mr. Aaron Robertson. Thank you for joining us so much today.
Yeah. Happy to be here. And excited to dive into this world of poker meeting a reality game.
Yeah, and so Aaron is now the first person in history to podcast with both of the twins, both me and my twin brother Nick.
Yeah.
They did a podcast quite a while back called the Rise and Fall podcast, talking about short-lived reality shows that lasted maybe 1 or 2 seasons in that ballpark, discussing why they were enjoyable, why they maybe didn't last beyond their television run. And we kind of have a show that Sam and I reviewed almost 2 years ago, in fact, called Game of Gold to discuss, which now, as of recent rumor mill cancellation discussions over the last few months by top poker players, that Game of Gold has probably not going to survive the season 1 curse here and will not get a second season. And so we wanted to go into maybe why this show was successful to Sam and I 2 years ago, and then maybe get into Aaron's side of things, someone who's less on the poker side of the equation and more into the reality show part of the equation, and see what his take is on the show.
Yeah. It's a very interesting show looking at it. And I'm excited to kind of compare notes and see what it was like for somebody who is well versed in the poker world versus somebody that's coming into it more from like oh, this is a cool show. Let me try and watch this and see what I think of it.
So, Aaron, I wanted to ask you, with your reality show experience, what makes a good reality show?
Ooh, that is a good. I think what makes a good reality show is something that gives the players the chance to have their own agency and play to their strengths. So even if it's something like The Bachelorette, they kind of have free reign to, do anything. And then same thing for something like this, where it's poker. I think, a good hook as well. I think good editing can also really sell a show. I look at something like The Genius from South Korea, where a lot of those games had really good game design, but there was also really good editing that they were doing. And then obviously the cast is going to be a big part of it as well. I think great reality shows have elements where the cast, the game, and the editing all work together in harmony. Because I think if one of those things is off, it's not really going to come across the same. Because you could have had an amazing show live playing it, but if you edit it weird, nobody's gonna, or if it's a really good show with good editing, but the cast is dry, it's not gonna come off the same as with a more dynamic cast. So I feel like it has to be kind of like a perfect storm of a lot of ingredients.
Hmm. And I'll ask you on the other side of the coin here, what was your previous experience or knowledge of poker prior to watching Game of Gold?
Yeah, so poker was always one of those games that seemed cool growing up. Like I would always like catch the World Series of Poker like on TV, like in passing. And so I'd see people like Maria Ho and be like, oh, okay. And in terms of playing it myself, I was one of the many people who had the Texas Hold'em game on, I think it was like the iPod, and they switched it over to the iPhone. It was the one that had like real people. I don't know how they did it, but it was like, and it just felt like it was very rigged against you. Like the AI was really bad. So probably did not give me a realistic expectation of what poker is. So that was really a lot of my poker knowledge was random games that I would get on my phone. Like, oh, maybe I'll do poker, or watching reality TV. And like, obviously there'd be sometimes a poker player or a poker dealer, and they'd talk about what they did. So it was always something that was kind of like in the ether, but not something that I dove into. I didn't go down the poker rabbit hole yet.
Gotcha, gotcha. And as far as when Game of Gold was first announced, a lot of the headlines or the descriptors kind of said, poker meets genius. And so during the initial, there was a teaser trailer, and then there was a full trailer that Sam and I watched. We were very excited as people in the poker world, watching lots of poker media even just over the last couple of years for the podcast, but also just in
Hmm.
years past. So we were, really happy because poker television kind of settled into a very predictable rut of, it's the same thing over and over again, and maybe the players are different. But this felt like to us the hopes of a show that really was taking a different spin at being a poker television show. And so it was for this rewatch, I really had to rewire my brain and try to flip the script saying, what if I was watching this as a reality game show that happens to be about poker rather than a poker show done in a fancy way? How about you, Sam? Sam?
Yeah, I try to do a similar thing, but I also was sort of doing that on our first watch, which was a couple of years ago. Um, yeah, I mean, I was really just sort of. Can you guys see me?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, you good, Ben? So anyway, I was trying to say I'm sort of looking at this as a reality show, and but I was sort of doing that on my first watch as well. I mean, we really didn't know what the show was going to be about. They said a lot about Poker After Dark. This was the same production team that had made that. And Aaron, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Poker After Dark or not, but it's just players sitting around a table playing poker. That's really all that it is. It's nothing fancy or anything like that. So going into this first episode for the first time, like, oh my God, they have all this crazy cuts and they have this crazy studio and all these top players playing poker. So it was kind of interesting to see that change on the first watch, and then going along wondering what are these new games going to be like. The element of surprise was there on the first watch. So the second time around, there was also the perspective for me of I know what's to come. I know who wins. I know who gets second place. Were they making a winner's edit for the person who gets first place? Were they making like a loser's edit for the person who gets second place? I was looking for little tricks like that as well.
Yeah. And so, Aaron, I guess we'll just jump right into things here. Episode one for me definitely had that kind of that first 20 minutes. I said this 2 years ago, I'll say it again. Kind of had this fun sort of what's going to happen magic to it that a lot of new shows, when you turn on for the first time, you just don't know what to expect. And then maybe you get into a rut of, okay, now it's just there's some formula for you. What was that first sort of act of the show's beginning like for you?
Yeah, it was really exciting. I was very intrigued as to what the show was. I think the studio design, even looking at the chairs, I was already like analyzing, okay, like what are the games going to be? And they had to pick like teams with the cards, and I was like, it took a second to realize that they were all aces, and it was the suits that was organizing the teams. And I was like, oh, like what is this going to be? And as somebody that knew nothing about poker, I think something that was intriguing to me was the cast themselves, just to see like me as a layperson, did I know anybody? And I only really knew two people. I only knew Maria Ho and I knew Kevin Martin because of Big Brother Canada, so and reality TV and stuff. So and I actually met Kevin in person, funnily enough, in Reno because I had gone to a reality event in Reno, Rounded Up Reno, and
Mhm.
Kevin was there 8 years ago. That was probably actually, according to him, like right after he started his poker career, like the year prior. So, very fresh on the scene in poker. So it's kind of cool to see his evolution from that point to now. And I'm subscribed to him on Twitch and stuff. And so that's really like the only two people I knew coming into this, and it was cool seeing how they highlighted everybody else. But I guess something that kind of got lost on me was every time somebody would come in, they'd be like, "Oh, this is a big person," and then the next person would come in. I was like, "Wow, this is a legend," and I'm like, I believe you. Like, I don't have a metric for like how stacked this cast was, or like if there was different poker eras that were being. I kind of got that with Maria and Kevin because I've known Maria for like eons. It's felt like, and Kevin is definitely more recent, but I like everybody else. I'm like, so that's something that kind of got lost for me, and I guess that's something that you can't really translate because I saw stats and I just yeah, like what in and actually this is a question for me, like in the poker world, because obviously there's things like the World Series of Poker, and I'm sure there's probably many different ways that people play poker, whether it's online or in person or different. There's like probably 10 million variants of poker. Um, what did this cast feel like for somebody in the poker world? Did this feel like an accurate representation of poker up until that point in 2023? Or, yeah.
Sam, what do you think? Let's go first.
Yeah, I'd say that there's a mixture of really prominent players and then more obscure players. Probably the biggest name in this cast would be Daniel Negreanu, who's won several World Series of Poker bracelets. He's considered to be probably the biggest celebrity in poker and has been for a number of years now. His nickname is Kid Poker because back in the early 2000s, he was a guy in his early 20s, playing with these big names and doing very well for himself. Other names, Fedor Holtz. He was the top poker player in the world. I'd say like maybe about 10 years ago and is still a very top player. David Williams got second place in the main event back in 2004. And hasn't had like a super huge career, but he's been fairly prominent. Jason Kuhn's kind of the same deal. I think he's won a few World Series of Poker bracelets, has had some top action, but again, is not like considered, a huge name like Daniel Negreanu is. Maria Ho, as you've mentioned, I don't think she's ever actually won a World Series of Poker bracelet, but she's been in a lot of television shows and has been very prominent. And Kevin Martin, I think I may have heard of him a couple of times before I watched the show for the first time, but this is really what brought my attention to him. And then the rest of the cast, Olga I'd never heard of, Yo Viral I'd never heard of, Kaina I'd never heard of. But again, they have pretty decent stats online. I think they're more just sort of online players. So I'd say like on the whole, yeah, I mean there's a lot of poker of online players and live players represented. And then Daniel Negreanu and Jason and Fedor have done online play as well and been done very well. I'd also say that there's a lot of names that were missing, like Phil Hellmuth, who's many people consider to be the all-time greatest tournament poker player of all time. He wasn't in there. Mike Matisow, who was a big player a number of years ago, he wasn't in there. So I mean, it's an interesting cast in my opinion. Watching it for the first time, then watching it for the second time, it was again kind of interesting knowing where all these storylines would go. Seeing, trying to look for these little moments and tricks in the editing. The first time I watched it, I thought Olga was getting a winner's edit because of all the emphasis of people being like, "Oh, I've never heard of her," and then she does very well in the episode. So I was sort of trying to look for that this time. I didn't really notice it, but I felt there was a good representation throughout.
I mean, I feel like if you're casting your dream poker show, this obviously isn't going to be that cast. But as far as giving us a mixture of up and coming players, old time favorites, and sort of in the middle era, players that were, I mean, most of these guys are still playing poker actively every day or almost every day. So it's not like they're out of the world, even if they're not in the spotlight as much. But I thought it was a good balance. I mean, obviously, it's hard to really encapsulate the poker community in a perfect 16 person, casting call. But I felt that they had, for the most part, some pretty, vibrant personalities, and maybe a few that aren't like maybe not, your typical casting, choices, but it's because of their poker accolades less than their personality per se. So again, a good mixture, nothing that I had any issue with personally. So anyway, one thing that sort of I thought about in on part of his rewatch was at one point David Williams he hides his card from other players under the guise of like information is power. Let me hide this. And again, it's one of those little moments where players maybe try to apply like mole or genius game show logic to this show, but when really it doesn't amount to anything because in spite of the flashy nature of the show at times, the structure's actually pretty simple, and it's unfortunate that the players didn't really have too much freedom over the course of the show to really kind of find these sort of not loopholes, but sort of like some flexibility in their gameplay strategies.
Yeah, and that was something that also had intrigued me about the first leg of this too, especially when they are going over the format of this first round, where each like they're split into teams of four based on the suits, and then um, each player from each team would be represented in each of the four rounds, and each round was worth a different amount of chips. And then the team that had the most chips would win a bunch of stuff, and the team that came in last and the least amount of chips overall would be eliminated. The thing that intrigued me the most was that last round that had like a mysterious amount of chips. And because part of me had wondered, if they were going to do something like very interesting, like maybe like the fourth place person actually would get the most chips for that round, or like, and maybe they could have told them that up front, where it's like, hey, try to loot, something that would make them play poker, or like second place gets the most amount of chips. So like you're trying to like play poker in a different way, and you might like change up who you put in for each round, but didn't really pan out that way. But it was definitely intriguing for that first episode with the mystery of it all. It really kind of helped
Yeah.
sell the game show vibe.
I almost feel like maybe, or instead of the team with the fewest coins, maybe the three players with the fewest coins, and three of the players on the losing team with the most coin, with the least coins are out, and then maybe like the fourth lowest total coins on a different team could be gone. Like let's say the person like on the last team, the
Mhm.
last place team, let's say it was Team Clubs, which it was big.
Hmm.
Let's say they had 40, 40, 40, and 45 coins. The
Yeah,
players of 40 are out, but if someone on Team Hearts had 42 coins, they would be out. Some sort of
right.
twist, or maybe like one player on each team knows the coin total for one match for one place, so they all have partial information. I thought, little tiny things that might just sort of
Ooh.
spice things up, and instead and even then, each player could be told that in advance. It's just ideas that came to mind with me on this rewatch, for example.
Yeah, because especially like once we saw that breakdown for what the fourth round actually was, and knowing that fourth, it was like they really just docked fourth place. They only got five chips, which kind of I felt like took all the air out of the sails, because if there's a team that was coming into the game in last place, it didn't really feel like they had much of a chance to do anything other than win. And I found it weird that they were like keeping the audience in suspense, announcing the places of the teams because it's like I think we know, like they're out. Like I don't know, because then I thought, oh well, maybe like there's going to be a twist in it. Because why are they keeping us in suspense if we already know that this team's out? But you know, I guess that's how they edited it for that.
Right. Yeah, no, and
Hmm.
for me, I felt that, episode one was a fun start to the show, even on rewatch. And
Hmm.
I was curious. I guess I had questions I was going to ask you about episode one, which you answered that you knew two of the players of the 16. Was
I
there
did.
anybody that jumped out at you as like someone you were picking to win? It was just too early to even think about that, or was there somebody that you had your eye on to start off with?
Yeah, it was. Oh, I felt so bad for this first episode because being like knowing who Kevin Martin was, and then finding out like Kevin's on team clubs and like from the clips that they showed of each player, I was really excited about team clubs because it had, Negrano on it. It had Jason Kuz. And I was really excited about that team because I wanted to see what they would do in future episodes. And I thought, oh, like this is a team that I'm rooting for and want to follow, followed by Maria Ho's team because like I know who Maria Ho is and I liked everybody on there. Yo Viral, Johan stuck out to me a lot because I found Johan to be very fun, full of fun energy. Olga, again, yeah, also stuck out because I was like, ooh, I wonder what Olga is going to be able to do because nobody knows because she's a poker player from Ukraine. So I was like, that's cool. That's like a cool element being brought in there. Um, yeah, I was really like intrigued by a lot of Jungle, um, was somebody that jumped out to me just because I didn't really understand. I didn't understand Jungle as like a character within the poker world, and I just didn't know how like these people were perceived on the outside. So I didn't know like, am I supposed to like Jungle? Am I supposed to be like I know like I didn't know how to feel.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, we're kind of jumping around the topic here, but the actual poker on display. So, while I don't feel that,
Yeah.
watching four people play poker at one time is anything original, what made the show kind of the secret sauce of Game of Gold really was having the camera feed for each team watching their teammates play. And so, I was curious for you, given that you don't really watch poker normally, was that, was having both of those elements, the table being played and that people watching, were you able to follow along really of how it all kind of flowed, or was any of the poker talk from the, peanut gallery kind of going over your head?
Both. It was one of those things where it was like it was cool to have the commentary because I know probably just watching a straight up poker event, you're probably not going to have the inner thoughts of the players. You're not going to get confessionals from them. You're not going to get confessionals from people that are watching or commentating on it, on each individual move. So it was cool to have that. But a lot of terms were flying out that I didn't know, and I didn't know how to take it. Like when they're like, "Oh, that's dirty poker," or "You don't do that," or "Wow, do the shove, do that," and I'm like, "Sure, I don't know what that means, but you do that." And then also looking at the screen itself, because from like playing poker games, I could kind of guess what some of the abbreviations meant, and having things like the outs in the top right hand corner definitely did help in terms of analyzing things, but there's just like terms that I didn't know. I don't think I even knew what UTG meant until the finale where they were joking about under the gun. I was like, oh, okay, that's what UTG. But like, I still didn't even know what the term actually means. I just saw that it was on the screen, or like D, or like the check mark. There's just a bunch of things that were like, I guess this means something, and I'm gonna have to guesstimate. And I was wondering if I would pick up the lingo. I picked up some of it, but like, again, I don't know what any of them actually mean in context. So it was kind of like, if you knew nothing about poker, I don't know if this was the right show to be thrust in as a beginner. But I think if you were somebody that was in the poker world and came across this show, I feel like they would really enjoy it because maybe they might have an understanding of the players or the game itself, or like it's a chance to um, meet a lot of players online and live that you might want to follow afterwards. Yeah.
Hmm. And then
I think that's totally fair.
yeah, I agree. And then another issue I kind of have with the, the structure of round one of the show is that it kind of feels like, when you're watching Survivor, there's a reward challenge more often than not. And that reward challenge, it's, you might enjoy watching it, but it's not as important per se to the game as the immunity challenge. And so the first
Mhm.
couple of rounds and episodes kind of in the same way. It's like, you want to know what happens, but at the same time, you want to wait, you want to wait till the going gets good when like, the last two matches mean a lot more, both because they're worth more coins, but also
Mhm.
because you can kind of sort of figure out who might be on the hook for elimination. That was also an issue I think of round two, looking at forward a little bit as far as emotional investment in the contestants of the show, and so um,
Yeah.
with the actual as by episode 3 and 4 is where you might actually kind of care, but then the sort of the big fail of team clubs kind of like as you mentioned kind of sinks the suspense of who's going to be out because once not for a single second did any player, at least in the edit, cast the idea of maybe like the coin structure will be kind of funky for as far as top to bottom coin value for those placements on the last match. And so, um, episode. So I feel like I think that the first 4 episodes of this 12 episode run covers round one, and then looking ahead a bit to round two, this is kind of like the bulk majority of the whole show is just round
Yeah.
two basically, and on one hand, it means we get more time to sort of get into this sort of one versus one, poker matchups, and there's some good matchups. But I also feel like I wonder if you, Aaron, was round two maybe the biggest slog for you watching this show?
Yeah, round two was felt interesting, and that was something that I also now that I'm thinking about it, something that didn't really help watching the show not knowing who anybody was, because I was trying to keep track of teams or like team history or like who was on what team and I was watching. I think as we went later on, it was like quote unquote easier to tell, but even like a lower third of like this is team clubs that I'm looking at. This is team Fedor that I'm looking at. You know, at least to help me contextualize or like who's speaking, because the captions on the YouTube video were cool, but like I don't know who's talking. I don't know like, you know, um, some lower thirds and some graphics of the non-poker clips would have really helped bridge the gap for somebody that has no idea who anybody is. Um, and yeah, it was a slog. Um, it was interesting, and there seemed to be a lot of. It also ended up being like the most dramatic of rounds because people were angry, and that was something that surprised me because I was like, um, because in my mind I'm thinking like, well, don't you want to? Yeah, the game design here was a little confusing for me because I think the way they designed it, it rewarded the people who were playing and not the team per se. And so, you see Jungle getting frustrated at Yo Viral, and I'm like, I I don't know if I'm supposed to agree. I don't know if I'm not supposed to agree. And also see with David getting angry at Charlie, like this is selfish, and like I don't. But like, aren't you trying to win? Like I don't know. Don't you want to survive? Like the point is to beat the other team. I don't know if like playing in a different order is really going to do anything because that might like completely change the team momentum and team morale, and it could really like I think the chip distribution for the round could have been different. I understand like you'd want like a disparity of chips, and I think they did a good job in round 3 of the chip like placement, but granted there was only 2 people playing, so they but I think for this particular chunk, I think if there was like um a different system, or like maybe like the person that won the last round maybe got like five more. So there's like an incentive to play, but it's not so disparaging that you have like in round three, two people that have like under 40 chips, and everybody else is like, a little bit more even distribution. Because then that would set up the final table well, so that yes, there is a range of chips, but it's not like so far that the person that's in like sixth place has no chance. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Probably for me, the most enjoyable part of round two was actually that first sort of, again, half episode of round two where the teams are selected and
Hmm.
they're fighting over the team order for the opening round of it, because at least there's some variety to what's on the screen. Literally, I mean,
Hmm.
I like Olga complains about her team's selection because Nikita picks the most amateurish players, for example, and she had I want to say like she had like the round robin consecutive pick of her team, and so she could cherry pick. And both Sam and I
Yeah.
were stunned at the last couple of players that went at the end of the schoolyard draft. Particularly, I think it was Josh Aryeh, who I felt coming into the show, I knew who he was. I was a big fan of him. I'm very impressed by his game. I thought he was definitely one of the favorites to do very well here. And so there was, for me, it was kind of odd to see his disrespect. And I also felt that he was one of the more jovial, really popped on screen players of the season. I don't know about you, but we haven't mentioned him quite yet here, really. But what was your take on him?
I love Josh. I love Josh. He was one of my favorites from the get go. I just because I just was rooting for Team Diamond in general. After the clubs all left, so yeah, getting to see Maria and Josh together for pretty much the whole um game was really really cool to see, and I was rooting for them both because I wanted them, because they were the team that were almost sent home in round one, so it was really cool to see that all four of them made the final table. Which I do wish that like maybe a different team had gone home first, and I could have gotten to see both the Team Diamond and the Team Club, because I think those two teams had a lot of the people that I was personally invested in and rooting for. Um, but yeah, Josh was very fun, really really fun. Like I'm the champ stuff that in the round one, that was really cool, very fun.
Yeah, and really the only kind of like, Game of Gold specific twist to the poker was the usage of the coins as time extensions. And I think in
Yeah.
round one, it took one coin for one extension, then they had to use two for a time extension. And, time extensions exist in poker anyway. So, and I feel like, these players have 80, 90, 100, 200 coins. So one or two is not going to make or break. So I
Hmm.
really didn't feel like that was really a, unique gameplay element. And the problem with poker is that it's kind of hard to really throw in something that doesn't throw off the entire balance of the game. Did anything jump out as you as something you might have added to spice things up during this poker action?
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That's also something that jumped out to me watching this, was that something I didn't really understand the weight of was the game variance. Um, Sort of like the team poker versus like heads up versus Indian poker. Like, um, they were talking about different terms, or like, oh, you're really good at heads up, or oh, I'm horrible at heads. Like, I don't like. Isn't it all just in my mind? I'm like, isn't this all just the same game? It's just with more or less people. Like, because I would understand maybe if it was something like, oh, I've never played. I'm bad at Texas Hold'em, or I'm bad at like name other variant here that I don't know. Um, is there a big, because I know in poker a lot of advice is about like, oh, pick a game, a version of the game that you're good at, but it all kind of feels like the same thing.
Yeah, no, there's many different variants, and there's also different numbers of players playing at one time within a variant. So, for example, if the more people at the table that you're playing with, you're going to play normally fewer hands per hour because
Hmm.
you have to have, your the hand quality you play has to be better. And so playing 1v1, you're playing almost every hand, so you have to get used to reading. There's a lot more psychology and less math to the game because you're only trying to outsmart your opponent. Whereas if there's 10 of us playing, now you could fold, most hands and be fine because you're going to, usually play on the stronger side of starting cards to begin with. So again, there's a lot of different variety to poker, and there's not a ton of variety in the poker here. I mean, I
Yeah.
compared season one to ice cream flavors. So we kind of had chocolate ice cream for round one. We had, French vanilla for round two, and then maybe had Rocky Road for round three. And those are all fairly common ice cream flavors, and these are all forms of poker that exist. But when you're thinking about a game called Genius Meets Poker, I want to see like peppermint chip and
Yeah.
coffee peanut butter Oreo, toffee crunch. I want to see some crazy stuff, and that again is one of there was maybe the unspoken prediction of maybe season two and onward of the show could have gone into more
Mm.
complicated games, but we obviously didn't get that in this first iteration and maybe only iteration.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been really interesting to see, for example, Omaha, where you have four cards to you and you have only two of those cards in your hand you can use to make your hand. So your other two cards are
Oh,
kind of irrelevant. You can also do Omaha high-low, which is you're trying to make the best high and low hand. Or you can do a game like Raz, where you're trying to make the worst possible hand with your cards and you're dealt cards one at a time. There's a lot of different variations that could have been really interesting. And I think, and these players, by the way, are experienced in Texas Hold'em. That's their bread and butter. But they've played these other games before, and I think some of them have even won tournaments in those other variations. So it
oh,
would have been kind of interesting to see that, I think.
that's cool. Yeah, because I think it could have been a really interesting element of like, because I thought, because seeing that there was 12 episodes, I thought that each episode was going to be like a different type of poker.
Mhm.
And so the way that this ended out, I think didn't really do them a great service because it didn't give them the chance to really um, play with the format and kind of keep the players on their toes and also keep the viewers on their toes because it did really feel like eating the same flavor for multiple episodes at a time, kind of, and then moving on to another similar flavor of a similar popularity for, it just kind of felt like very, not one note, but definitely, like one chord. Like we
Mhm.
didn't really go anywhere. And yeah, I think more variants would have really helped. The Omaha sounds really cool.
Yeah, and you mentioned the two kind of big like reality show fight moments that were given lots of like publicity in the poker world was the fight between Jungleman and Viral, and then to a lesser extent the frustration of David Williams with Charlie Carroll about the
Hmm.
team order and him having to always go third. And I agree that from like the poker curve of television, those are like top moments, but from like compared to Survivor, Amazement, these are like really a blip on the radar. So it's again, you're gritting on a curve here when it comes to these, supposedly huge moments that, people like, people fighting is usually an enjoyable moment in poker. And it can be sometimes in, Survivor, Big Brother, etc. But the problem is that these two moments, nothing really comes of them. I mean, the teams, no like gameplay specific moment can arise from a team fighting over each other because when they're in these team rooms, this is in between the poker gameplay, and so they could do whatever they want in those rooms. It doesn't affect the results of the show ultimately.
Yeah, I think the only other case would be maybe in the case of Charlie's team, who argues with each other and then all lose the Indian poker round in the following round. I think it's kind of like their comeuppance a little bit. That's the point. It was kind of like and it was interesting because for both rounds one and um, two to three. Like it was like the favorite teams to win were often the ones that ended up going home, like with Team Club, and then eventually Charlie's team getting eliminated from Indian Poker round. It was kind of interesting to see how that came about. So
Yeah.
it was cool to witness. But yeah, I definitely wish the game had more to it. Now, ironically, And I don't know if they have really planned for this, but watching this series did make me want to learn poker and start playing poker myself online and stuff. So yeah, I'm ready to jump down the rabbit hole. I don't know where I'm going to start, but it did make me interested in following the players and wanting to learn more about the poker world and seeing what things like GG Poker and stuff were all about.
Oh, that's what I
There's
guess.
actually a good there's a good organization that Ben and I have worked with in the past called Rec.poker. We were on their podcast, and it's
Oh,
for recreational poker players. You can play free tournaments online and get instructions and things like that. So if you want to learn how to play poker, you can sign up with them.
that sounds amazing. Cool. I will do that.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that Team Charlie all lose in round three because I actually didn't really like clock that mentally when I watched this the first time. It was only on rewatch like, oh wait a minute, they all even though their teams get broken up into
Hmm.
pairs for round three. Yeah, the coin flip goes tails all three times for that team and it, I want to ask you because we haven't really talked about her yet. Kind of England, she kind of
Yes.
stuck out to me
Oh,
as sort of
yeah.
the underdog.
Yeah.
What can she? Underdog of the season. And while she probably had a bit more focus in the first third of the show compared to maybe the middle act, and then obviously comes back to make the final table, so she's there for a fair
Hmm.
part of the final table. What was your take on Kaina?
I really enjoyed Kinda, and I felt really bad for Kinda from the beginning because it just felt like it felt like she was being underestimated from jump because they had her go in the first round, and the second round was kind of like an afterthought of a pick, and she has to sit there while Jungle's sleeping through all the matches and stuff. And at least she got to shine with Indian poker because she'd played it before and was able to, make it to the final table and not be the first eliminated from the final table because that was something that I was afraid of for her. Just kind of having been playing from behind the whole time. But it was really cool to see her journey. I felt like she was like the representative of like the everyman of poker. Like you could just like place yourself in the kind of spot and kind of root for her that way. So it was really fun. I was hoping she made it a little bit further in the final table, but it was nice to at least see her there for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny we refer to her as the Everman of the cast, but really, I mean, she's won over $1 million in tournament poker. I'm sure she's added to that total since this show's recording, and it's compared to the average Joe like us, she's still light years a much better player than us. But just in this sort of very this class system of poker, she's maybe on
Yeah.
the lower side of things compared to some of these heavy hitters that were around her. So it's funny how that kind of perspective can arise in a cast like.
Yeah.
Um, were there any individual poker hands within any of these episodes early on that maybe you were really entertained by? I know that you're not well versed in a lot of
Ooh.
technology because there were a few moments that for me I thought were pretty good, but knowing, poker logic and strategy, maybe I'm, predisposed to recognize their value. Maybe I was curious about you. Anything that jumped out at you?
Yeah, because what would happen is I'd watch it and then something would happen and they'd be like, "Oh, that was an interesting move there." And I'd be looking at the percentages and I'd be like looking at the things and seeing if the person that had the losing hand was able to get the person that had the winning hand to fold, or if the person that was in a position where like if they went all in they would lose, and if they folded they'd be fine, like where they recognize that they were in that tenuous of a position. um so it was cool to see that, and I'm pretty sure like if you talked about the hand I would remember it. It's just it kind of got lost from me among the many hands, especially being somebody that knows very little about poker. So it'd be like I kind of likened it to being served a um 10-course meal, and like I can say that it's good, but somebody who's a chef or in the culinary world could probably speak to the ingredients of the dishes and could talk about like why it's good. I just was like, these are cool plays. I heard of a term surrounding Negron called speech play a little bit. I wish we had gotten to see more of him. so I could see that in future games. But him talking Robinson, who was another interesting person to watch, kind of being one of the newbies, um, talking him out of a winning hand that he had, was interesting to see. Maria Ho had a lot of fun moments of like using the time extensions and like thinking it through and then making the right decision of folding or calling. Um, there was that hand. There's a couple of hands maybe in the finale where Maria ended up with flushes on like the last card. I don't know what the last card's called. Is it the river?
Yeah, the river. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. The last card. And yeah, it was interesting to see like how somebody could have like, oh, Nikita. There was one time Nikita went all in, and I said, whoa, whoa. All in versus, oh, who was it? Daniel? I think it was Daniel.
Okay.
I can't remember who she was playing.
In the in
In
round two.
the round two.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to. I'm just see my
The
notes.
losers bracket one.
This was bracket one.
Yeah.
Nikita. She played David Williams.
David,
Yeah,
sorry, not
David.
Daniel. David
Mhm.
Williams. Um, David, and she went all in on him, and the team was like, whoa. And was able to get him to fold. And it was just really interesting to see those different kinds of play styles. Um, and yeah, there was just a lot that kind of went over my head watching it, especially in terms of like the blinds and like the pressure and the time
Mm.
element of it. I didn't really know how that was really working, but yeah, it was very interesting to watch.
I mean, there was one hand where Maria meant to take tech
Yes,
and then forgot to throw the coin in,
yeah,
and that's
saved
really
yourself.
the only time where like the poker gameplay and the game of gold specific mechanics kind of intersected at any point in time.
Hmm.
And obviously, I remember that moment, but there wasn't too many moments like that because the coins really only could be used for time extensions as point keeping, and then obviously for their final utility as the number of chips you began the final round with. Each episode began with a flashing of the coin totals, like a scoreboard, and I don't know. I felt like it didn't really matter to me to a certain degree how many coins somebody individually had because at no point was someone's individual coin total determining if they were in or out. It was always your team
Right.
on the route or you have immunity for that for like in round two, for example, the winning team of the little mini tournament get to skip round three and gets 100 coins on top of it. And
Hmm.
I thought that maybe that was maybe 50 might have been about right because yes, they can't earn coins in round three by not being in it, but you already have immunity. I mean, how much advantage do you really need? I don't know if you thought that
Right.
was maybe a little bit too much of an advantage to that team.
Yeah, it was interesting for that team. I mean, granted, um the I mean, they ended up being sixth, fourth, and first. So it didn't really necessarily help them in that final table because the people at the end ended up being more from the other team. Maria just happened to beat them all.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, uh, I guess the advantage could have been maybe cut down a smidge to maybe be like it'll match the highest because I think like for the round three people, whatever half coins, like the person that got the highest, maybe they match that
Mhm.
advantage. So it's sort of like as if they won round three and had a bye, but didn't get like way more chips than anybody else could have gotten.
Mhm. And something that was kind of the closest thing to what like an editing style was because as the show was kind of getting into its usual funk of a few matches and this maybe one or two matches here is that maybe
Yeah.
one player kind of got like the episode title to describe them, the thumbnail was them, and maybe in the description. So we had I think really it was maybe Charlie, Maria, and I guess maybe Josh Aryeh would kind of have like their episode, like an episode that was kind of, or maybe David Williams too, would have like one episode about them. And, it was, not like that we got like a backstory interview about them along with them playing. It was just more that they were in those matches in that episode. Did you feel like
Right.
enough focus to give to a player, or would you have maybe added some more, personal touches to the episodes to kind of give us more of a rooting interest on somebody.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing, especially because I know round two being so much of it, and also with the lopsidedness of how round two could go with both Maria and Yo Viral, both kind of winning out those respective rounds that they were involved in. Um, Maybe kind of took out a lot of potential to see a bunch of people. Actually, the most exciting part of me for round two was the initial Charlie's team versus Vader's team, right?
Mhm.
Um, for the initial win, um, because everybody got to play at least once, and it wasn't like a complete blowout. And it really came down to the last two people. I liked when those situations happened.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, they could have done better in terms of distribution and also used like generic thumbnails because I ended up trying to like avoid seeing any of the thumbnails or the titles by just kind of like minimizing the player and then just pressing like the fast forward button. So like I didn't need to see what the next video looked like because there was probably a lot of information
A little bit,
in
yeah.
those, and I wanted to avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had forgotten that the losers bracket went into 5 rounds. I had just thought in my head maybe it went to 4 rounds. So that was maybe a little Mandela effect in my head going on for that. And that was yeah. So of the four matchups, two of them went at least into
Hmm.
best of to the fifth round of best of three, but
Yeah.
best out of five. But again, it kind of again it felt like the opening two matches again you kind of don't have to care as much because nothing can be won in the first two matches of the team squaring off. And the same for the winners bracket. I mean, I care about who wins the winners bracket, but I also care more about the losers bracket than the winners bracket.
Right.
Yeah,
And
that was my thought entirely. I mean, there were some tense moments throughout. It's kind of curious to see who exactly will win, how exactly the coins will shape it. But it wasn't until that very last match and the fact that it played all three players on each team in the losers bracket played against each other. And now here we are, sudden death. Whoever loses this is going to go home. That was really when that started to take off for me in terms of tension.
yeah, and unfortunately, we only got to watch the two teams that were squaring off in the back rooms, and it cut down on giving us a little bit of everybody watching other teams play when they don't have any investment. I wonder, did you wish that maybe all four teams could watch each match, or were you okay with only being the two teams playing?
I do because I think it would have been good to have a lot of that information for both teams, especially since the winning teams were going to play each other, the losing teams were going to play each other, and I'm sure there were going to be some cases where those people would encounter each other again later, either at the final table or in round three. So any information that the players could have and like keep in mind, especially since a lot of people may not have known each other um, in the same way as others, um, really could have helped kind of like sell the picture of what was happening.
Hmm. And so, yes, ultimately with round two's conclusion, we're left with 9 players. Team Nikita unfortunately bows out, and uh, but then for episode 11 entitled Squid Game, we get
Mhm.
all of round three in one episode, and then
Yeah.
all of round four in one episode. So, a very bizarre choice of pacing. We had 4 episodes for round one, which you had 4 big matches. So I guess that kind of makes sense. And then we had 6 episodes for round two. So we're talking about 4, 6, 1, 1. I don't know. I thought maybe we could have either had a fifth round in there to not have just we're just coming off of the fallout of this lengthy round. Maybe give us a little bit more, but then just to all of a sudden have everything squeezed into 2 more episodes. I didn't quite vibe with me well. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think that's probably what hurt this format the most. I think of doing dividing the 16 people into teams definitely does seem interesting at first, but I think um the fact that a lot of the games were team oriented um made it that yes, like we were losing like 4 or 3 people at a time, but it took so long to get there that by the time we got to that episode, it just didn't really like it didn't feel it just kind of felt stagnant because it just felt like we were waiting for like, okay, this, we're waiting for these next few people to fall off. I think it would have been far more interesting, um, would be to have more eliminations. Um,
More often.
so yeah, so you could have had a thing of like, hey, you're dividing into four teams, you're sending people in. These are the amount of chips that this round is for, but whoever comes in fourth place is out. So you still get an elimination every episode, and there's still like maybe that team element would have like carried around too. Hey, you get a certain amount of chips for being the team that garnered the most chips in these like four survive or something like that, and then having like a different poker format more often, or something where it's like eight people are playing a game.
Seven
you
one.
know whoever is first out is, or I don't know, whatever rule you want to have, or like the winner of this round gets to choose somebody for elimination. I don't something where there actually would have felt like a genius element to it, because really the only genius element of this game was Indian poker, which was a game that was utilized heavily in the first season of the Genius Korea. So um, yeah, and it would have been cool too, as somebody that didn't know a lot about poker, to learn about formats that most people don't really know about or think about. Because I think most people would probably know Texas Hold'em, maybe would know. There's probably a second one that I'm thinking of that I don't know the name
But like
of.
five card draw.
Yeah, something like that, where it's like this is something you see at the casino all the time that a lot of people have played. And then, but what if you throw out a format that's like very few people play, something that's in the weeds, that's like a really weird, Indian poker is probably one of those where it's like it's a game that if you've heard of it, oh, you know what it is, but it's not like Indian poker is not like what you think of when you think of the World Series of Poker. So it would have been cool to see and learn about different things about poker, and also, I guess, include things that might help beginners. Not necessarily like teach them about poker, but it felt like I was watching a masterclass for students who have been playing poker for like a year or two. So I'm like, this is probably going to be really helpful for me to look at in like a year or two. But as somebody coming in blind, as a reality show, may not invite the largest audience for future seasons and things. So um, I think taking a Squid Game approach, and because they had Squid Game, they like just do something that whittles it down, but a format that people can follow and people can learn, and it's something that we're all learning at the same time. So it's not like we're throwing you in, and I hope you know exactly how the strategy of this is.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think too how, television has evolved over the years of streaming and YouTube prominence, and how, we used to just have, one elimination per episode
Mm-hmm.
for, one leg of The Amazing Race, one tribal council period of Survivor, and when, if streaming shows kind of play along with their episode length, they maybe change it up a little bit, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
they, have cliffhangers. They don't have one clean round per show. And so
Mm-hmm.
this episode is the only one to kind of really get that formula in there. And it was actually a pretty divisive episode amongst the poker community. I think everyone kind of like wanted to see, poker A, poker B, poker C. And here we have kind of a off the beaten path kind of round. And I didn't mind the switch up. And I actually felt that I kind of liked how they had to partner up and they didn't know if they're going to be a team again or if they're going to
Mm.
be. I mean, you could kind of think in your head, if we know the final table is 6 people, there's already three in there. We're probably going to have 1v1 scoring off in this, but no one really thought about that when they were making their teams. And so I thought that was fine. And the problem is that they have 10 minutes to pick teams, and it takes them all of 1 minute to actually pair up. And so it kind of was another example of a show trying, like the show trying and failing to be something kind of spicier than what actually we got on camera there.
Yeah, it would have been
You
interesting
didn't.
if like halfway through they would have said, "You have 5 minutes left. You are playing against your partner." Like you have, something where like here's your initial choice. Do you still want that choice? Something to make them do something or think about something, just to give them at least the most amount of agency going into that third round. Um, but yeah, I think that third round probably would have been well more received again if they had multiple varieties of poker included, so it didn't feel like it stuck out in such a big way in comparison to everything else. Like obviously the final table, you can have a standard poker, but I think everything before that, I wish they had kind of played around with just doing anything and everything to get chips to get to that final table, and kind of so um pure poker ability was not the only way to get to the end, if that makes sense.
Did I read about something before?
I was just gonna say you didn't think that Charlie and Jungle meditating on the floor was spicy. I thought that was. I'm just
No,
Yeah,
those.
I mean, I didn't mind the fact that Indian Poker was in one episode because the games were kind of moving quickly. And I thought it was kind of interesting. Again, I never played Indian Poker before, so I thought, it's okay for it to be one episode. And then you did mention that the last game was in the last episode, but that was twice as long. So there's a bit more time to really let that flesh out. I mean, they maybe could have split that into two episodes. Maybe have Heads Up be its own episode, and then, getting up to Heads Up be one episode. But I think, that sort of structure is okay for me. It's just as Aaron said, I think there should have been more game variety. It would have been fun to have some sort of like reward challenge where no one goes home necessarily, but maybe you get an advantage in the game that follows in the second half of the episode. That would have been fun to see something like that.
I like that. But it was finally around episode 11, which was, round three, where I finally kind of soured on Ali Nejad's hosting, where he really only appears like 3 times the whole show.
Yeah.
And he tries to play like the Jeff Probst, tribal council, probing questions of the cast. And really, it just didn't work for me at all. He's like, you picked your teammate. Are you happy about your teammates? And or like, do you deserve the beer? You only have 26 coins, kind of. And it just felt very amateurish. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like in the reality show hierarchy of hosts, I think he definitely ranks towards the bottom, which isn't entirely his fault. He doesn't really have too many chances to really, jump at you on the screen. But I just really did not like Ali Rashad here as the host.
Yeah, and that was also something that I didn't really have in terms of a background. Like, is he in the poker world? Is this somebody that we're supposed to know who this is, or if this was this just a host that they picked for this show?
No, he's one of the commentators for Poker After Dark.
Oh, okay.
Also for the World of Poker, he's in the booth with usually Nick Schulman, and so they're just like announcing the action, and I think he does that job fine, but I just feel like it didn't translate well to Game of Gold.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so I want to ask you. You mentioned that this is a very common game in the Genius. I think it was also a death match in the UK Genius game
Yes, yes.
past year. Do you feel that this iteration of Indian poker was handled well? Do you think it was done better in Genius? Do you think it was done better in Game of Gold? How did you feel that the editing and the display of this game did in comparison?
Yeah, the Genius only had 1 through 10.
Hmm.
So, and I want to say it was 10 was the one that if you discarded, you were punished for that. Um, so that made it kind of interesting because you could kind of easily count that I guess they increased the difficulty of having, all 13 types of cards available. Um, I think this one ended up being fine. I think it there was definitely an interesting aspect of there's a chance you could have the same card. Um, hey, they have a queen, but you could have an ace. Like, do you want to risk folding and potentially, getting out so there was a certain aspect to the game that did feel interesting. And I also did feel interesting that they would add the deck once it came down to the last 10 cards, because then you couldn't really necessarily count
Mhm.
those cards going forward, because you had to kind of reset and add those 10 to everything else. So yeah.
And then the only like fancy trick was they would occasionally blur one person's card so that we could
Mhm.
kind of surprise the audience when they would see their own card. And was that something that was done in Genius as well, or is that just more of a Game of Gold thing?
Yeah, they've done that on the Genius as well, just to give you suspense about a certain round, to see if they, you know, lost a bunch of chips, or to see like, ooh, like, did they do the right thing? Did they do So, yeah, it was interesting to see that element finally come in episode 11, which I was waiting for. So it was really exciting to see Indian poker, because it was like the one format that I actually did know all of the rules to. But yeah, it was I think all three rounds were, interesting to watch. Maybe got a little fatigued by the time we got to um Yo Viral and
Andy Stacks.
Andy Stacks. Yeah.
No, that's fair. And then, but as far as, getting a little tired by the end, we lead into round four, the finale of
Oof.
Game of Gold, basically a double length episode. We haven't,
Yeah.
but each of the episodes, for the most part, tended to be in that like 50-minute plus or minus maybe 5-minute range per episode, and that includes sometimes like a previously on Game of Gold, and a couple episodes had a coming up trailer. Usually it was on the shorter side. So maybe we'll say maybe a minute for those parts here. And so we have pretty much an almost 2 hours long finale, which
Yeah.
is not a length foreign to Sam and I when it comes to final tables for other poker tournaments, because
Okay.
usually they have like a two-part episode for the finale of a tournament, so that's not crazy. But I felt that maybe when you're only playing with six players, you don't really need this much time especially when this is pretty much just all poker. There's not really any downtime. I mean, we see a little bit of like a few quick sound bites of each player because they already kind of previewed the finale in the end of episode 11, but. For as far as an episode that's just pure poker plus a couple of costumes, it's pretty much as raw poker as it gets.
Yeah. And that's something that I was very intrigued by too, was obviously I know in poker tournaments people might dress up in different ways, but I didn't know, like, is there a strategy to it? Is this just a thing where some people, where it's like, WWE, and people just bring out these characters for no, I didn't know what in the poker world people dressing up or appearing different really meant. It was fun, but I just didn't know if it was like, was this for the online show, for the entertainment of the audience? Was this something that was more of like, this is a poker strategy to distract and, prevent them from seeing my tells? I don't like, what is the general vibe for that?
I mean, Jungle has worn costumes before. I actually met him in Vegas once while he was in a costume accepting an award. You kind of had
Oh,
like it was like a half Super Street Fighter, half like Dragon Ball Z costume. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And so he does this a few times. Phil Hellmuth, one of my favorite players, usually will have some sort of costume display when he enters the room for the main event in Las Vegas. But for the most part, it's a pretty rare occurrence. And Jungle, his character was called Danny McFanny, and
hmm,
he brought a couple of extra hats for the table that were worn
yes.
by Maria and Fedor for a little bit. And again, I think he just did it for funsies. I don't think it really
Okay.
changed anyone's play or anything. But I think it was amusing, but I felt like it was just kind of strange to only have it here in the finale rather than maybe earlier in the show as well.
Yeah, it was so odd to me. We were getting all these like leprechaun jokes, and I'm like, okay, I mean, I guess we're doing and then the fact that Jungle's in the final too, it's just like, okay, like this is it's a very interesting process that we have going on here, but I'll go with it.
I mean, by this point, you had watched, maybe 10 hours of poker-ish at this
Mhm.
point. By the final table, did you feel like maybe you were maybe a bit more in the know as far as the flow of poker, or were you still kind of not quite there watching this?
Yeah, I just kind of, especially, yeah, I didn't really feel like I felt like I knew more than I did coming into it, but I also didn't feel like I understood the moves that were being made.
Hmm.
Um, it felt more like, and also especially hearing people explain their moves or their thoughts, or they're like really milking these rounds out, and I'm just like, I don't know. And also like the bluffing and aspect of it, and like not really knowing if they did or did not bluff you is an element that I didn't really consider, because I'm thinking like playing apps, you could just get like shown the cards. So I didn't know if that was like a thing that like what the differences between live and online poker are, if there's elements of that come into play as well, because I know there was commentary throughout the season of like, oh, this person's more used to online play than live, and there's live tells and all this other stuff, and obviously the elements of being on a reality show. So yeah, but it was fun to watch. It was an interesting journey and foray into poker. I do wish they had more seasons of it, but I do understand, at least on the surface, why there wouldn't be a second one. But it would be cool if there was.
I mean, was there anybody from the final six that you maybe had pegged to win the whole thing? Was there anyone that you felt like was gonna had a winner's edit, or that you felt that just had the chops to take it down at that point?
I thought Fedor Maria would probably win. I was surprised to see Jungle at the end. I don't have a metric for how good the players are in the pro world, so I don't know what the caliber of a play style there is. And Maria said that Jungle is really good at heads up, so I'm like, I don't know if it's um like how close or far it was from being competitive, but yeah, I was thinking Maria or Fedor would probably win.
I mean, those two played probably the longest hand as far as minutes spent on
Yeah,
the hand in the whole show. And I was curious, did the dynamics of that hand, were you kind of like at least taken aback by that hand? Because, firstly, kind of goes all in with a weak ace.
yeah,
It just sort
yeah,
of has to watch in horror as these other two are squaring off, and she's basically out of the tournament. When
yeah.
it's been probably, Fedor spends each of his time extensions, and it's a pretty. It's like he's like lost his composure. He's like trying to think this all through and everything. Was that
Yeah,
resonate you feel as well as it did with us?
that was such an interesting hand, because I was like, what does he think that she has? Especially knowing that it was like a flush. I was like, well, probably likely that she has something better than what you have. I don't know if you're like, putting your chips in, but but he explained it afterwards, and even hearing the explanation, I was like, I like I don't understand. I think the fact that there were so many possibilities in his mind too, was so interesting, because as a layman, I don't know if I would have thought of that many possibilities. I think I would have been thinking of like the type of hand rather than the combination of hands
Mhm.
that Fedor was thinking of.
Gotcha. So yeah, so again, a big spoiler for everyone who hasn't watched it 2 years later. Maria Ho takes it down. We mentioned it earlier. It's funny because I kind of thought that maybe she would make it to the end, regard whether she won or not. I just had a feeling when the show began that she would make it even after kind of got fourth place in that first match in round one.
Hmm.
Here it happened, and to my surprise here, I actually thought that the surprise like best part of the finale was the end credits. Because I felt that could have been like a great intro sequence to the show, but there's really not really an intro sequence. It just kind of flashes game over.
Oh yeah,
And there's a great sequence where it shows each player and then it's in the order that they're eliminated. But I thought that could have been a great little, if this had been on TV, for example, that would have been the intro sequence to use.
yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah.
Uh, So again, as far as the show's view count, so I think the most watched episode was episode one. It only had 616,000 views, which really hasn't grown. Like I want to say it garnered probably 90% of that the first week it dropped, and then
Hmm.
subsequent episodes, up and down, but kind of in that 400 to half a million range for the most part. And
Right.
I think for YouTube, that's quite good, but for something that was going to have to probably take more money to make maybe an even better season two. Definitely not numbers that I think warranted. Uh,
Hmm.
I can imagine the YouTube ads. How much money are they really making? I have a hard time believing that the top prize of $436,000 would have been covered by the YouTube ad revenue from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
also looked on Reddit to just sort of see references to this. Nobody's really talked about it since it's come out. I sort of Googled a little bit, no articles or anything written about it. So unfortunately, it doesn't really seem like it's caught on outside the poker community. I see a couple new comments on the YouTube videos here and there, but unfortunately, not a whole lot of discussion about it.
Mhm. And as far as the again, my MVPs of this season, I would say for the poker, you got to go with Josh Aryeh and I think Maria Ho for closing it out. Jungleman was kind of like he would have episodes where he'd be asleep the whole time, and then episodes where he'd just be massively entertaining. Like it was a very like a bipolar sort of presence on screen, and then kind of I think again kind of as the underdog and kind of making it pretty far relative to her experience to the rest of the cast. I think was fun to watch and root for. Was there anybody else that you felt that you wouldn't mind maybe seeing on any other reality show in the future that you think would be have some promise there?
Yeah, Joe Viral. I really think that Joe Viral had a lot of star power in this.
Mhm.
He just stood out to me even from episode one of having a lot of really good team spirit. I mean, I know Robinson also had a lot of team spirit, but I think Joe Viral, every time they cut to that, Team Spades room, it just was lighting it up with his commentary, and also had some very aggressive um, poker plays, especially in round two. Um, and three, yeah, and three.
Mhm.
So it was kind of interesting to see Joe Viral, and Joe Viral got to third and wanted to do it again. So definitely seemed like somebody that would be like a really good reality TV poker player to me.
Mhm. And I guess if you were going to cast a season two of Game of Gold,
Yeah.
would you want to use any of the original season one cast, or would you want to see a brand new roster of players, or maybe have them all compete to be one to fight for a spot or two in the next cast?
Yeah, I would bring back probably some people from team clubs that got eliminated, especially if we want to get more mileage out of Negreanu, or Jason or Kevin Martin, who are probably going to be, itching to do a lot better the second time. Maybe even like a Joe Viral, like somebody that got really close but didn't win. Um, and then, you can mix in like a Hellsmith, just or like, people that were like names that probably could have been on the cast but weren't, along with anybody that's come out recently, and just kind of see what mix you get. Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and again, as far as answering the question of does this show work for non-poker aficionados, for me, I kind of gotta say no in a sense. I mean, I feel like
Yeah.
it didn't quite translate to a broad audience enough. I mean, I feel like if you had more episodes like the Indian Poker Challenge, you intermix those, maybe, you don't have to have the entire cast play in one of those games, by the way. You could have like, they divide the teams. One team plays poker regularly. One team plays some other pokerish game. There was a great mini game championship thing in the main event about a decade ago called the Side Games Championship or Side Action, where they played like chip stacking and card counting and sort of poker themes, sort of games of skill and finger dexterity and stuff. I think if you could maybe throw some of those in there, maybe that would have been just enough to tip the scales to the sort of the Rob as a podcast audience, for example, to maybe enjoy the show more wholeheartedly. That would have been my sort of extra ingredients to this recipe here.
Yeah, I think it would have been definitely interesting to see a lot of different varieties of poker. And even if they wanted to like really throw a curveball and like do a card game as a challenge, as an initial challenge, just to kind of like see how does a poker player tackle Egyptian rat screw? I don't know. Um, and just or like it didn't have to be all poker related things, but it could have been interesting to see like various mini challenges and then like a pseudo death match, if you will, being a variant of poker like an Indian poker or a heads up or maybe three people are playing each other in a variant of like Omaha High Low or something, where it's like something that the audience can follow, but is also related to poker and could teach them about different poker varieties. And it didn't have to be everybody. We didn't have to watch 5 episodes of people doing the same thing. And then you could have commentary from the peanut gallery of everybody watching the game. And that could have been very interesting to see of more if they tried to do something like this again.
Or I even feel like just give
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree.
I feel like
Yeah, I
more
mean, I'd really have to agree with what you both said. So, yeah. I mean, I really also think would be interesting to maybe in a future season if they had like an amateur compete as well with these big
Yeah.
professional. Like if they had a tournament before the season took place and the amateur got to go and play, that would be really interesting throwing a curveball. But yeah, Aaron, like you said, I really think that there should be different variations of poker. You were thinking, talking about card games. I was thinking like Yu-Gi-Oh! Like that would just be kind of fun to just have
Oh.
them play Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon or something. Just total curveball. Like, all right, you're here to play cards. Well, here's cards. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of effort went into this. I think there were a lot of some fun moments throughout, and even in the second round, which was 6 episodes long, there were still fun moments in each episode. And obviously, everybody had a lot of fun, and that's great to see. But I think that they would definitely need to change this significantly working forward.
And for me, I think the easiest fix would just be add more uses for the coins besides time extensions. Pay 5 coins, you can see one of your opponent's cards. Have a way to like exchange coins with other players. Like, I promise to, it's a little bit of collusion. I don't want to have that in poker, but be like,
Mhm.
I'll pick you for my next team if I win this round. Here are some coins and to, some sort of more social dynamics because poker is a very social game, just not from a reality game show standpoint. So maybe find some
Mhm.
ways to cross those barriers. Um, and again, half of our ideas could easily fail, but that's the kind of the fun is you mix and throw in 10 new ideas and 5 of them work, and then you can use them for season 3. That's kind of the fun of TV is you can spice things up and adjust accordingly. So even Survivor makes mistakes with new gameplay elements, and just try something new next time. It's no harm there, really, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And I know that you're no stranger to online reality games, Aaron. I know that you
Yeah.
recently finished fourth place in Mole, Ohio 2020.
Yeah.
Congrats on that.
Oh, thank you.
If you were gonna do like a Game of Gold-ish org,
Hmm.
would how would you might what would be maybe one or two big things you might do to make that work?
Yeah, I think for me, I would try to change up the format. And so I would try to figure out like what are things that um a large group can play and probably see if I could have like maybe single or double eliminations instead of like whole teams, maybe even wait to eliminate like teams of 3 or 2 until we get like towards the very, very, very end. They're doing that at the beginning. I think, and also looking at different variants of poker and seeing like, okay, is this something that you could play as an elimination match between, you know, 2 to 4 people, and then work backwards from there and see, okay, is there like a mini challenge or something that you can do um, that could determine who the people that get to play the poker game of the week are, and just kind of figure out what that would be like.
Yeah, well,
Mhm.
I, I'd sign on to play that game for sure.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Me too.
So guys, that I think that's pretty good. I mean, I feel like again a mixed bag of emotions here about Game of Gold here, but I think again always fun to discuss the goods and bads of any sort of television or internet programming. There
Yeah.
was some pretty big headlines in that are tangentially related to poker recently. There was this
Oh.
NBA like gambling on games and like side bet ring that was I don't know the full story, Sam. Why don't you enlighten me here more about the
Yeah, Aaron, have you heard about this?
No.
So this just came out like a couple days ago. So
Oh.
apparently Bob was running some rigged poker games in and around New York City with NBA players, Chauncey Billups, who is the current head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, apparently was bringing gamblers into these rigged games. So I'm
Whoa.
just looking at a New York Times article here. The dealer had decks of cards through a rigged shuffling machine that had hidden technology that read the cards in the deck, and then it would be transmitted, the information would be transmitted outside the building, and then there'd be an operator sitting there who would tell a player at the table about what the cards were. And then that player would use hand signals or different things like riffling poker chips or fidgeting with their cards to signal to the other players at the table what cards they had and other players had. So, there might be like one sort of target, and then the other five players are all in on the scheme to rip that target off.
Wow.
Really crazy stuff, apparently. Yeah. Damon Jones, who also played in the NBA for a few years, was in there. The Gambino crime family was involved. I'm also just reading here that there was an X-ray poker table. And so some players had sunglasses or contact lenses that could have markings on the backs of the cards. There's actually a photo here of these cards lying on a table, and you can see through the backs of the cards and see like, oh, this guy has pocket tens, this guy has ace king. Crazy
Wow.
stuff. Yeah, this just broke in the news. Um, Apparently people were, lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Apparently one guy lost $1.8 million in 2 months.
Whoa.
Wow, really crazy stuff. So obviously this is breaking, we don't know for sure who was involved or not.
Wow, that's
Apparently the
crazy.
players who have lost have stayed anonymous, so we don't really know for sure yet who these guys were. Doesn't seem like any big players were involved or anything, but this is pretty sick. I mean, wow.
Wow.
I
That's
want to say
crazy.
that the NBA folks that were involved in here, they had to like offset those losses because they were like rigging like sports betting. Like an NBA player like took himself out of the game early, like I'm injured, I can't play, and then told his crew like because his crew was betting the under on his statistics for that game. So like if he scores under 10 points, these bets will be
Oh,
up. So I have 9 points. Oh, my hamstring. Let me get out of the game. And so that money on those bets would score. And so then that's, you got to pay off these desperate gambling debts somehow. So that the integrity of the game at risk right there. And that's just
wow.
one player on one team of one sport. Who knows how rampant this could be elsewhere.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Other poker news, really, I guess a couple players Sam and I are pretty big fans of having some success. John Deeb winning his eighth bracelet and Martin Cabral winning his fifth bracelet. That was pretty cool. Cabral is basically if you took someone with ADHD, put them at the table, took them off their meds, gave them alcohol, they just never stopped talking. That's him.
Wow.
So he could have
That's
been really
brilliant.
entertaining in Game of Gold had he played, for example. But he's kind of like what like poker's like love to hate play.
Oh, yeah.
And so winning his fifth championship in the World Series of Poker, he's ascending the list of champion of most wins in history
Yeah.
of that. So he's only a couple more good years from really fighting for the top spots there.
Wow, that's cool.
I mean, we talk about how, the best Survivor players have won once, maybe twice in certain cases. I feel like if you were going to compare like number of bracelets to winning Survivor, I want to, unless you're beating 15 people on Survivor on average, in poker you're beating like thousands and thousands. So you might
Wow.
like, actually be saying, it should be maybe the reverse order. But I feel like, winning two seasons of Survivor is like, to me, in the poker world, I feel like that's like, four bracelets is one Survivor championship. That's kind of maybe the number I would give.
That makes sense.
What do you think, Sam?
Yeah.
I think that's a fair ratio. Now, granted, the history of poker players on Survivor, they tend to be fairly subpar, but.
Yeah, I want to say there've been like five or so. You have JRB,
Yeah.
Roberto Balans. You got like they made the merge, right? So that's not terrible.
Yeah.
You have
Mhm.
oh, hang on.
Anna Kate.
Garrett Adelson. Garrett Adelson. Adelson
Yep.
got like last, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that Maria Ho was on Amazing Race and Vanessa Russo was on Big Brother.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody
Anna
else?
Kate.
Yeah. Is that anybody else?
There was the one that
Ronnie
was on
Barda.
Apprentice.
Oh, Ronnie Barda. Ronnie Barda. That's right.
Oh yeah.
Got last place also, right?
It was Annie was on Apprentice. I can't remember what her was.
Oh, Annie Duke. Annie,
Yes. Yes.
Any
and runner up. So actually, that's not bad.
Hmm.
No, like,
Hmm.
anyway, Aaron, as far as what you're doing right now, any shows, anything you want to plug right now? This is sort of your
Ooh,
opportunity here.
I'm just here. I'm just existing. I'm taking in new reality TV and just binging what I can. I'm excited to learn about different things, and so I think my next foray is going to be in poker. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm excited to start and see what that looks like.
Excellent. Yes, and
Yeah.
great. And I know that you probably podcasted about as much TV as Sam and I have because we watched a lot
Yeah.
of poker over the last 4 years. You've
Yeah.
podcast about many different shows, much more variety than we have. Was there any one show that you think that a poker player, poker fan might appreciate that they might not have heard of?
Oh, poker player would appreciate that they might not have heard of. I would probably say in recent history, things like Devil's Plan on
Mhm.
Netflix, I think were really good because there was some poker involved in Devil's Plan. That's a really good one. And especially in terms of game design and what I kind of thought the Game of Gold would kind of be like. Devil's Plan is definitely one of those that seemed like really fun. And lots of gambles, lots of gambits, different types of games. So and strategy and theory. So I think if you're into that, yeah, Devil's Plan is a good one to start with. Trying to think of other games that could be something. Yeah, that's the first one that comes to mind. I'm trying to think of other card game ones that would be uh on there, but yeah, I can't think of any.
Gotcha. No, that's fair. So we'll say Devil's Plan. Check it out, and I'll definitely check it out. See the poker. That'll be fun because
Yeah.
I have seen pretty much every form of poker you can think of on TV. There's poker movies, poker TV shows, poker game shows, poker reality shows, poker documentaries, poker video games. You name it, we've seen it. So we'll add that poker mini games within a different game.
Yeah, I'd say season two has more poker in it than season one, but yeah, definitely check out Devil's Plan for that.
All right. Well, on that note, guys, thank you for listening to our discussion here. We'll see you next time. And until next time, guys, enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, enjoy your poker on TV.
top of the morning to ya.
Bye.